All right, the suspension cables from the Golden Gate Bridge's towers are farther above the roadway near the towers and close to the roadway near the middle of the bridge. Okay, you can see a picture in your book of this if you want to. It's on page 264. If you don't want to look at your book, let me just give you a basic look. I'm not an artist. So basically you have these towers here, and there's these suspension cables that go like this on Golden Gate Bridge. These are the towers, there's that, and then you got these cables going down like this. Those are the suspension cables. All right. So the suspension cables are farther above the roadway near the towers and close to the roadway near the middle of the bridge. So as you get close to the tower, they're getting longer. As you get close to the middle of the bridge, you're getting shorter. Make sense? All can see that okay, right? You can figure out your distance from the middle of the bridge, x in feet, and the height of the suspension cable, y in feet, at your position by using the equation x equals the square root of y minus 220 over 0.010583. Mathematicians make bridges, by the way. Engineers do, so that's probably the real formula for that. Okay. Now, how far is the cable from the roadway when you're 200 feet from the middle of the bridge? So, what I want you to see here is this is an equation, and they give us variables, and it's important to interpret what that equation means before we start messing around with it. So, this is my equation containing the variables x and y. I need to identify what x and y represent. So, your distance from the middle of the bridge is x in feet. The height of the suspension cable, y in feet. So, x represents, if this is the middle of the bridge, how far away from the middle of the bridge I am. Y represents the height of the suspension cable. Now, it says we are 200 feet from the middle of the bridge, so what are they telling me? Are they telling me x or y? They're telling us x, right? And they want to know how far is the cable from the roadway. They're asking us what is y, right? Notice the equation doesn't have y equals structure to it, right? It has x equals structure. Okay, and this is a word problem, but there's some specific exercises in your homework where it's going to say solve for the variable underneath the radical. All right, so let me just demonstrate how to do that first. So this says x equals, I want it to say y equals. So let me demonstrate how to do that real quick. So x equals the square root of y minus 220 over 0.010583. If I get this to say y equals, or to get this to say y equals, I need to solve this for y. I need to say y equals, instead of the square root of y minus 220 over this equals x, right? So in essence, x is going to act like a number in this problem, as with the rest of the numbers. Y is going to be my variable, and y is underneath the radical, so this is a radical equation. My first step is to isolate the radical, and currently the radical is being divided by something, so multiplying both sides by that something would be the correct first step. So I'm going to get 0.010583x equals the square root of y minus 220. So again, equations, do whatever you feel like doing to it, but do it to both sides. So times this, same thing happens to both sides. On this side, the division cancels out the multiplication, so we're left with just the radical. On this side, nothing's canceling out, so we're going to have to just stick those together. I've gotten to the point where my radical expression is isolated all by itself, so now this is a square root, so I have to square both sides to get rid of the radical. Square this, square this. So on the right-hand side where the square root is, that's easy, right? Square root squared just gets rid of everything. So I'm going to get y minus 220. On the left-hand side, I'm going to get this number squared and x squared. So notice we have a number times x that's being squared, so we're going to square both pieces. So I'm going to write 0.010583 squared x squared. pretend I don't have a calculator at my disposal right now, so I'm just going to write down what I'm supposed to do. Okay. And then finally, if I want to say y equals, I got to move the 220 over here, right? So I end up with y equals 0.010583 squared x squared plus 220. So in any problem tonight where it says solve for the variable underneath the radical, or if it says solve the equation for x, and x is under the radical, that's what they want. Solve for y equals everything else. Solve for x equals everything else. All right? And again, it'll be using these techniques for getting radical equations solved. Now, x equals 200, so now if I just put 200 right here and work this out, I'm going to get the answer. So y equals 0.010583 squared times 200 squared plus 220. All right? Find y. We know what x is. We put it in there. So get my calculator out. Make it a little bit bigger. So,
Mr. Klein,
yes,
where'd you get 200 from again?
right there.
Oh, okay.
So again, it says we're 200 feet from the middle of the bridge. X is the distance from the middle of the bridge, so they're telling us what X is. They're asking us to find the height of the cable, or how high above the road we are. So they're asking us to find Y. So 0.010583 squared times 200 squared plus 220 equals 224.48 feet. I could have just as easily on this problem just put 200 right there, right off the bat, and just worked it out. That would have been fine. Okay, but again, since there's homework problems that involve this technique of finding the other variable, I just want to make sure I went through that process. If this were me doing this problem, I would have put 200 right there. When I multiplied, this would have been just some number. Then when you squared it, it probably would have been easier to look at it that way. But again, for the sake of the problems and homework that have that skill necessary, I want to make sure that you saw how to do that.